Welcome to the Futurist Public Intellectual. 2 days ago, the Supreme Court of the United States made history when it promulgated the first official ethics code since its founding in 1789. This unprecedented self-imposed code of conduct is clearly the result of the constant politicized scrutiny of the 24-hour news cycle, the instant feedback loop of social media, and the reactionary tactics of the Democratic Party. Even though this ethics code is in response to the alleged ethical violations of Justices Thomas and Alito, liberal justices like Breyer had at least 225 subsidized trips during his tenure, including one paid for by Governor Pritzker of Illinois. And even the vaunted Justice Ginsburg had a trip to Israel in 2018 paid for by Israeli billionaire Morris Kahn. This shows that ostensible judicial improprieties are not the exclusive domain of conservative justices. Chief Justice Roberts noted in his 2011 year-end report on the federal judiciary that, quote, the court has never addressed whether Congress may impose financial disclosure, gifting, and recusal requirements on the Supreme Court. The justices nevertheless comply with those provisions, end quote. In other words, self-governance has been working because, even without congressional oversight, the justices have been adhering to an ethics code followed by lower court judges anyway. If Congress does try to enforce its own ethics code, it may even turn out to be unconstitutional. Just because there hasn't been an ethics code doesn't mean it's a bad idea to formulate one, particularly in light of the skeptics. However, the one thing that should not be lost in this media frenzy is that the Supreme Court's role is vastly different from the other two branches. It's precisely people's misunderstanding of the Supreme Court's role that leads to unjustified criticism of the institution. You see, the independence of the Supreme Court is the crux of its power. Preserving that independence is so pivotal because Congress is, by design, the most powerful branch. If checks and balances are going to happen, Congress cannot badger the Supreme Court into submission through an endless series of alleged ethical violations. Congress already possesses the power to override the president's veto. It cannot obtain the power to neuter the Supreme Court too. If Congress was allowed to enforce an ethics code of its own making, sheer chaos would ensue because any U.S. citizen would have the ability to obstruct the administration of justice simply because they saw some modicum of impropriety. If a potential ethical violation was reported, it would have to be investigated. When would any Supreme Court case even see the light of day when there will obviously be at least one annoying person who will do anything to stop every Supreme Court case that's ever given the writ of certiorari? Life in general, and certainly politics in specific, is a balancing act. In my view, I would rather have a self-governing Supreme Court with imperfect justices who rarely do questionable things, over a Supreme Court whose operations could be stopped at every turn. A congressionally imposed ethics code also diminishes the rationale for the typically exhaustive confirmation process. Supreme Court justices are appointed after many years of service in the legal profession. In Justice Thomas's case, he was appointed as Associate Justice 17 years after graduating from law school. If there was any inkling of impropriety, one would have seen it earlier. In fact, that was the whole point of the Anita Hill hearings. If someone survives the confirmation process, then the justice deserves the lifetime tenure and judicial independence that come with the job. However, let's say, for the sake of argument, that there was a patient, conniving judge who was simply waiting for their Supreme Court appointment to unleash their evil agenda. Well, that's what impeachment is for, folks. The same 24-hour news cycle and viral social media that got us here are the same watchdogs for this type of evil agenda. In the end, the imposition of an ethics code on the Supreme Court is most likely to be politically motivated and a circumvention of the impeachment process, which is currently the only constitutionally valid way for Congress to remove the justices. The 2-day-old ethics code is a reasonable compromise that both liberal and conservative justices have unanimously signed off on. Let's see how that goes, and if egregious ethical violations end up occurring anyway, then we can revisit the issue in the future. Thank you for listening to The Futurist Public Intellectual.